June 19, 1944, 0730 hours. High above the churning waves of the Philippine Sea, where the horizon blurs into an endless blue void, Lieutenant Saburo Sakai grips the control stick of his Mitsubishi A6M Zero, the wind howling through the cockpit canopy like a distant scream. The salt-tinged air bites at his face, mixing with the acrid tang of aviation fuel and the faint metallic edge of anticipation. His squadron, part of the Imperial Japanese Navy's elite air arm, streaks through the scattered clouds at 20,000 feet, engines thrumming in perfect harmony. Below, the carriers of the combined fleet slice through the ocean, their decks alive with the promise of victory. Sakai scans the sky, his eyes sharp behind goggles fogged with morning humidity. He's flown these skies before. Pearl Harbor, Guadalcanal, where American planes fell like broken kites before the Zero's lethal grace. Today, intelligence whispers of a new American fighter, some bloated successor to the clumsy Wildcat. Sakai smirks, sharing a radio crackle with his wingman. They call it the Hellcat? More like a fat cat waiting to be skinned. Laughter echoes in his headset. The Zero is untouchable, light, agile, a samurai's blade in the air. What could these gaijin throw at them now? But as the radar pings grow insistent, dark specks materialize on the horizon. American carriers, Task Force 58, unleashing their swarms. Sakai's heart quickens, not with fear but exhilaration. Engage! The order snaps. He banks hard, the Zero responding like an extension of his will, diving toward the fray. You can almost feel it, the rush of acceleration, the G-forces pressing you into the seat, the sun glinting off the rising sun emblem on his wings. This is a Pacific War at its rawest, where men and machines dance a deadly ballet. Yet, in this moment, Sakai doesn't know that the laughter in his cockpit will soon turn to silence. The Hellcat isn't just another plane. It's the predator that's come to end the hunt. The story of the F6F Hellcat's rise begins not in triumph, but in the ashes of American desperation. Rewind the clock to December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor burns under a hail of bombs and torpedoes, the sky dominated by the sleek silhouettes of Zeros. Designed by Jiro Horikoshi, the A6M Zero, rise into the Japanese, Z to the Allies, was a marvel of engineering. Weighing just over 5,000 pounds empty, it boasted a 1,200 horsepower Nakajima Sakai engine, allowing it to climb like a rocket and turn on a dime. Armed with two 7.7mm machine guns and two 20mm cannons, it outmaneuvered anything the U.S. Navy could field. At the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942, Zeros shredded American devastators and Wildcats, racking up kill ratios that made Allied pilots whisper of invincible ghosts in the sky. Imagine you're there, strapped into an F4F Wildcat aboard the USS Lexington. The deck heaves with the swell, alarms blaring as Japanese formations close in. Your plane, stubby and tough, feels like a bulldog against a panther. The Zero loops around you effortlessly, its cannons barking. Bullets stitch across your fuselage, and you fight to keep the stick steady, sweat stinging your eyes. That's the terror the Zero instilled, psychological as much as physical. Japanese pilots like Sakai, with hundreds of hours under their belts, exploited every weakness. By mid-1942, the Pacific was a graveyard of American aircraft, from Wake Island to the Solomons. The Zero's range allowed it to strike from afar, its agility to evade and counter. We ruled the air, one Japanese ace later recalled, his voice laced with bitter nostalgia. Yet, cracks were forming in that dominance. On June 4th, 1942, during the Battle of Midway, American dive bombers caught Japanese carriers with pants down, but in the dogfights, Zeros still held sway. It was the capture of an intact Zero that shifted the sands. Petty Officer Tadayoshi Koga's plane crash-landed on Akutan Island in the Aleutians, discovered weeks later by U.S. forces. Shipped to San Diego, it was dissected like a rare specimen. Test pilots flew it, noting its phenomenal low-speed handling, but also its vulnerabilities. Thin skin that shredded under fire, no self-sealing fuel tanks, a tendency to flame like a torch. It was a glass cannon, one American engineer noted. But contrary to myth, the Grumman F6F Hellcat wasn't born from the Zero's secrets alone. Design work had started earlier, in 1941, as Grumman sought to replace the Wildcat. Enter Leroy Grumman and his team at Bethpage, New York. They envisioned a fighter that embodied American industrial might, rugged, powerful, forgiving. The XF6F, one prototype, took to the skies on June 26, 1942, powered by a Wright R 2600 engine. But it was a switch to the Pratt & Whitney R 2800 Double Wasp, a beast delivering 2,000 horsepower. That transformed it. The production F6F, 3 rolled out in October 1942, a brute at 9,000 pounds empty, with 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns packing 2,400 rounds. It could hit 376 miles per hour, climb to 37,000 feet, and absorb punishment that would crumple a Zero. Armor plating protected the pilot. Self-sealing tanks shrugged off hits. "We built it to kill Zeros," a Grumman test pilot quipped. As 1943 dawned, the Hellcat began filtering into squadrons. Fighter Squadron 9, VF9, aboard the USS Essex got the first batch. Pilots like Lieutenant Commander Phil Torrey trained relentlessly, learning boom and zoom tactics. Dive from altitude, strike fast, climb away. No more turning fights where the Zero excelled. Hit and run became the mantra. The Japanese, through spotty intelligence, heard rumors of this new Grumman fighter. At airfields on Rabaul and Truk, pilots dismissed it. Another heavy American crate, they joked, toasting with sake. Masatake Okumiya, a staff officer, later wrote of complacency. "We thought our Zero was eternal, but eternity has an end." The first blood came on August 31st, 1943, over Marcus Island. Hellcats from VF-5 escorted bombers, encountering Zeros for the first time. Lieutenant J.G. Richard Loesch claimed the inaugural kill, his .50s ripping into a diving Zero, sending it spiraling in flames. "It was like shooting fish in a barrel," he radioed. But these were skirmishes, probes. The real test loomed in the Central Pacific, as Admiral Chester Nimitz's forces island hopped toward Japan. Fast forward to October 5, 1943, the raid on Wake Island. Commander Charles Cromwelin's VF, 9 Hellcats tangled with 27 Zeros. In a furious melee, the Americans downed 22 for no losses. Japanese pilot warrant officer Isamu Miyazaki survived, bailing out over the lagoon. Rescued, he reported back, "The new American fighter is fast, armored. It doesn't burn." Whispers turned to murmurs in Tokyo briefings. Still, pride held. "Our skill will prevail," Admiral Menaichi Koga insisted. "You feel the shift, don't you? That creeping doubt in the cockpits, the way confidence frays like a worn flight suit." As Hellcats proliferated, over 12,000 built by war's end, they began rewriting the rules. In November 1943, during the Gilbert Islands campaign, VF-16 aboard USS Lexington claimed 17 Zeros in one day. Pilot Ensign Alfred Tadeo described the chaos. "I lined up on a Zeke, squeezed a trigger, his wing folded like paper." The Japanese called it the Blue Devil, its folding wings and robust frame evoking a demonic presence. But the laughter lingered in some quarters. At an airfield in the Solomons, aces like Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, the Devil of Rabaul with over 80 kills, scoffed at pilot reports. "Americans can't fly like us," he said, downing a Hellcat in a rare turn fight. Yet, statistics mounted. By late 1943, Hellcat kill ratios hovered at 5-1. The Zero's flaws, outdated engine, lack of upgrades, widened the gap. Enter the human element. American pilots, many fresh from stateside training, bonded with the Hellcat's forgiving nature. It landed easily on carriers, its wide gear absorbing rough seas. Japanese pilots, depleted by attrition, flew exhausted, in planes patched with canvas. Sakai himself, wounded earlier over Guadalcanal, flew with one eye, his vision a blurred determination. As winter 1943 faded, the stage set for larger clashes. In February 1944, the truck raid, Operation Hailstone, saw Hellcat strafe airfields, downing 200 Japanese planes on the ground and in the air. Survivors radioed frantic warnings. The new fighter is everywhere, unbreakable. Okumiya, witnessing the carnage from a command post, penned in his diary. Our Zeros are being swept away. Yet, the ultimate reckoning awaited in the Philippine Sea. Back to that June morning. Sakai's squadron vectors in, spotting the Hellcat formations. Attack! He rolls inverted, diving at 400 miles per hour. But the Hellcats don't scatter. They climb, using superior power. One peels off, guns blazing. Sakai twists away, but the tracers are relentless. His wingman explodes mid-turn, a fireball plummeting to the sea. What is this machine? Sakai thinks, adrenaline surging. The battle erupts into the great Marianas turkey shoot, where 300 Japanese planes fall to 30 American losses. In the midst of it, Commander David McCampbell, aboard USS Essex, leads VF-15. His Hellcat, the Mincy 3, dances through the swarm. In one sortie, he downed 7 Zeros, his guns chewing through ammo like a starving wolf. They came at us in waves, he later recounted, voice steady but eyes distant. We mowed them down. On the Japanese side, panic sets in. Pilot after pilot calls mayday. Voices cracking over static. As the sun climbs higher, the sea below litters with wreckage. Floating debris, oil slicks, parachutes like forlorn jellyfish. Sakai pulls away. Fuel low, squadron decimated. The laughter is gone, replaced by grim silence. This is a turning point, where mockery meets reality. But how did it come to this? What secrets forged the Hellcat's edge? June 19, 1944, 0900 hours. The Philippine Sea stretches out like a vast, indifferent mirror beneath the climbing sun. Lieutenant Junior Grade Alexander Vrashu, call sign Alex, sits in the cockpit of his F6F Hellcat, number 19 of Fighting Squadron 16, aboard the USS Lexington. The carrier's deck has just flung him skyward, the catapult's jolt still echoing in his spine. His Pratt & Whitney are 2,800 growls at full military power, prop biting the humid air as he claws for altitude. Below, the American fleet steams in a tight circle. Task Force 58, 15 fast carriers, ringed by battleships and destroyers whose guns track the sky like nervous sentinels. Radar screens aboard the flagship USS Indianapolis glow with incoming blips. For massive Japanese raids, over 400 aircraft in total, launched from carriers 300 miles west. You can taste the tension in the air, hot, metallic, laced with high-octane fear. Vrashu checks his oxygen mask, flexes gloved fingers on the stick. His squadron leader, Commander William R. Killer Kane, crackles over the radio. Feet dry. Angels 25. Bandits inbound, bearing 270. Distance 100 miles. Vector 240. Buster. Full throttle. The Hellcats surge forward in loose combat spreads, climbing through thin cirrus toward the intercept point. On the other side of the invisible wall in the sky, Vice Admiral Jisabro Zawa's mobile fleet has launched everything it has. Carrier decks are empty now. Flight crews bowing toward a rising sun as their planes disappear eastward. In the lead wave, 69 aircraft, 43 Zeros, 18 dive bombers, 8 torpedo planes. Many pilots are barely trained, some with fewer than 100 hours total time, rushed through flight school as Japan's reserves bled out. Their orders are simple. Find the American carriers and die destroying them. The first contact comes at 0950. Lieutenant Commander Charles W. Brewer, directing fighters from the USS Essex, spots the incoming formation on radar. Tally-ho! Bogies at Angels 20, 3 o'clock high. Hellcats rolling from above and behind. The classic boom and zoom that doctrine now demands. No turning, no mercy. Ensign Wilbur Spider web dives first. His Hellcat streaks down at 450 miles per hour. Gun sight pippers settling on a Zero's roundel. 6.50 calibers roar in a 2-second burst. The Zero's port wing shears off at the root. The plane flips once and tumbles seaward, trailing black smoke. Webb pulls up hard, scanning for the next target. Splash 1 Zeke, he calls, voice calm but edged with disbelief at how easy it was. Across the sky, the slaughter begins in earnest. Japanese formations, discipline on takeoff, fracture under the onslaught. Zeros try to turn into the attackers. But the Hellcats refuse the bait. They dive, Fire, zoom away, reset above. The R-2800's supercharger whine becomes a sound of doom to Japanese ears. Alexander Vrashu finds himself in the middle of a loose gaggle of 20 Zeros escorting Val-dive bombers. He picks one off the rear, closes to 300 yards, triggers a 3-second burst. The Zero bursts into flame, pilot visible for a frozen second before the canopy rips away. Vrashu rolls inverted, dives under formation, climbs back for another pass. In 6 minutes, he claims 6 kills, each one a short, violent punctuation in the chaos. His wingman, Lieutenant J.G. Homer Brockmeyer, watches in awe. It was like Alex was mowing a lawn. You feel the vertigo of it, don't you? The sky tilting, sun flashing across the canopy, tracers arcing like golden rain, the smell of cordite seeping through the vents, the sudden silence when a Zero disintegrates mid-air, leaving only a puff of black smoke and falling debris. By 1100, the first Japanese wave is annihilated. 69 aircraft launched. Only 27 limp back to their carriers, many damaged beyond repair. The Americans lose 3 Hellcats, 2 to anti-aircraft fire from their own nervous ships. The ratio is almost incomprehensible, 22-1. But Ozawa is not finished. At 11:07, he launches a second strike, 128 aircraft. At 12:30, a third wave of 47. A fourth of 82 departs late and flies into the meat grinder already turning. Commander David McCampbell, leading Air Group 15 from the USS Essex, takes off in the middle of the carnage. Fuel state critical, ammo low from earlier sorties, but the sky is full of targets. In one legendary 90-minute patrol on June 19th, McCampbell and his wingman, Ensign Roy Rushing, engage wave after wave. McCampbell downs 7 aircraft, 5 Zeros, 2 Judas, his guns overheating, belts running dry. He returns with 17 rounds left in one gun and none in the others. Later awarded the Medal of Honor. He will simply say, "They kept coming and we kept shooting." On the Japanese carriers, radio operators listen in horror as pilots scream final transmissions. Enemy fighters everywhere. Cannot shake them. Banzai. Then static. Admiral Ozawa, pacing the bridge of Taiho, receives damage reports that are not reports at all, only silence where squadrons should be checking in. Below the fight, American destroyer crews watch the sky in stunned fascination. Spent cartridges rain down like metallic hail, pinging off decks. Parachutes drift lazily. Some Japanese pilots who manage to bail out, others American. Sailors manning 40mm Bofors guns fire at anything with a rising sun, adding to the carnage. By late afternoon, the numbers are beyond belief. Of 430 Japanese aircraft launched that day, approximately 240 are shot down in air combat, most by Hellcats. Another 50 or so fall to anti-aircraft fire or ditching. Total American aircraft losses: 29, mostly operational accidents on crowded decks. The press dubs the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The name sticks. Lieutenant Saburo Sakai, flying with one blinded eye and burning hatred, survives the day by sheer skill. He claims one Hellcat, probably an operational loss misidentified, but watches his comrades vanish. Pulling away low on fuel, he looks back at the empty sky where hundreds of planes have been hours before. The laughter of the morning briefing feels like a lifetime ago. As the sun dips toward the horizon, Hellcat pilots recover aboard carriers, hands shaking from adrenaline. Deck crews swarm, rearming, refueling, patching bullet holes with quick-drying dope. Pilots gulp coffee, trade incredulous stories. Did you see how they just fell apart? I got 3 on one pass. The flight surgeons note elevated heart rates, dilated pupils, classic combat shock. But the day is not over. American search planes have located Ozawa's fleet at extreme range. At dusk, Admiral Mark Mitchell makes the hardest decision of his career. Launch a maximum deck load strike knowing his aviators will return in darkness, something carrier doctrine had long declared suicidal. Hellcats will escort that strike, too. And tomorrow, June 20th, the pursuit continues. The Zero, once the terror of the Pacific, has been reduced to prey. The Hellcat has announced its supremacy in blood and fire. But how complete was the reversal? And what did it cost the men who flew both machines? June 19, 1944, 1830 hours. The flight deck of the USS Enterprise heaves gently under a blood-orange sunset. Admiral Mark Mitchell stands on the bridge, binoculars pressed to his eyes, watching the last recovery of the day. Smoke still rises from distant splashes where Japanese planes ditched. His staff officers cluster around radar repeaters, voices low. They have found Ozawa's mobile fleet, 300 miles away, retreating west at flank speed. Fuel state for a round trip, marginal at best. Return in full darkness, unprecedented, deadly. Carriers have never attempted mass night recoveries. Deck crash statistics are grim even in daylight. Mitchell lowers the binoculars. His face is granite. "What the hell?" he mutters. "Launch, M." Klaxons howl across Task Force 58. "Launch all aircraft." This is not a drill. Flight decks erupt into control frenzy. Ordnance men shove 500-pound bombs under wings already scarred from the day's turkey shoot. Armors top off .50 caliber belts. Fuel hoses snake across steel planks. Avgas fumes thick enough to taste. Pilots sprint from ready rooms, helmets under arms, still buzzing from the afternoon massacre. Commander David McCampbell, ammo expended and fuel near bingo, is waved off. Instead, younger pilots strap in, men like Lieutenant Commander George Brown of Torpedo Squadron 10, who has never landed on a carrier at night. Hellcats of VF-16, VF-15, and VF-2 take the catapults first, escorting Helldivers and Avengers loaded for bear. You feel the deck tilt as the carrier turns into the wind. The catapult officer's flag drops. Your Hellcat lurches forward, 2,000 horses roaring, tailhook rattling. Then silence, just the engine and the slipstream. You climb into the twilight, joining up on a running lights winking in formation. The sun sinks fast in the tropics. Within minutes the sea is a black void below, the sky a deepening indigo. At 19:15 the strike, 326 aircraft wings west. Hellcats fly high cover and low masthead search. Navigation is dead reckoning and hope. Radio compass needles swing wildly from Japanese jamming. Fuel burns faster than planned in the rich mixture needed for combat power. 2 hours later, 300 miles out, the first Hellcats spot the enemy fleet silhouetted against the horizon. Carrier Zuikaku, battleship Haruna, cruisers flickering with anti-aircraft tracers. Lieutenant Warren McLean, VF-2, dives low over the water, his wingman flashing recognition lights. Tally-ho! Carrier's bearing 260. The attack is ragged but vicious. Avengers borne at wave-top height, torpedoes splashing into the dark. Helldivers peel off in steep glides, bombs whistling down. Hellcat strafe decks, .50 calibers sparkling against steel. Japanese searchlights stab the sky, 25mm guns chattering. Carrier Hyo takes 2 torpedoes and erupts in a massive secondary explosion, lighting the night like a second moon. But the distance is too great. Many bombers miss. Ozawa's force, already crippled from submarine attacks earlier in the day, Shokaku and Taiho sunk by USS Albacore and Kavala, limps away trailing oil and fire. Now comes the reckoning. Outbound fuel calculations were optimistic. Return leg, headwinds, combat maneuvering, adrenaline-rich mixtures. One by one, pilots report bingo minus. Low fuel, no margin. At 22:30, the first calls crackle over guard channel. Any station. This is Red Fox 3. Fuel critical. Position unknown. Then another, and another. The night swallows them. Back at the task force, Mitchell makes the second hardest decision of his life. Turn on the lights. Every ship in Task Force 58 blazes to life. Deck lights, searchlights pointed vertically, signal lamps, even star shell illuminance. The fleet becomes a constellation on the Black Ocean, visible for 50 miles. A beacon and a target. Japanese submarines are known to be prowling, but Mitchell will not leave his boys in the dark. Hellcats approach the fleet in ones and twos, then dozens. Pilots search desperately for a flight deck among the lighted silhouettes. Some mistake destroyers for carriers, wave off at the last second, engines coughing on fumes. Lieutenant Junior Grade Alexander Vrashew, the afternoon six-kill ace, circles the USS Lexington at 500 feet. His fuel gauge reads empty. The deck is a blur of lights and motion. He drops gear and flaps, lines up. The LSO, landing signal officer, waves him in frantically. Too high, too fast. Vrashew chops throttle, stalls onto the deck. Hook catches the three-wire. He's down, hands shaking. He climbs out to find the deck crew cheering. Not everyone is so lucky. Engines sputter and quit over the water. Canopies slide back. Pilots step into the night. Parachutes blooming white against black. Some ditch beside destroyers. Picket ships maneuver at full speed, throwing lines and cargo nets. Sailors dive overboard to haul soaked aviators aboard. Others vanish into the depths. No splash seen, no dive marker. Of the 326 launched, 209 return to carriers. 80 ditch or crash near the fleet, most crews rescued. 16 aircraft simply disappear. Total aviator losses, 49 dead or missing. Dawn, June 20th. The Philippine Sea is littered with floating wreckage. Yellow rafts, oil slicks, empty Mae Wests. Destroyers comb the area, loudspeakers blaring, "Any American aviators?" in English and broken Japanese. Hellcat pilots who survived the night launch again at first light. The mission, finish Ozawa. Scouts find a crippled fleet 150 miles farther west. Carrier Chiyoda burning, Zuikaku trailing smoke. Hellcat strafe relentlessly, skipping bombs across decks, shooting down the few Japanese fighters that rise to meet them. Saburo Sakai, refueled overnight on Guam, joins a desperate defense. He claims 2 Hellcats in a furious low-level duel, but the numbers are hopeless. By midday, the remnants of Japan's carrier air arm are shattered beyond repair. Ozawa signals Tokyo, mobile fleet air strength effectively 0. Back aboard the American carriers, exhausted pilots tally the 2-day score. Hellcats alone claim 292 confirmed aerial victories in the Philippine Sea, many more probables in ground kills. Japanese naval aviation loses over 600 aircraft and the irreplaceable core of its experienced pilots. The Imperial Navy's carrier force, once the scourge of the Pacific, is reduced to a fleet in being, hiding in home waters, powerless to contest the seas. In ready rooms, American pilots pore over gun camera film. Frame by frame, Zeros disintegrate under converging streams of .50 caliber fire. The footage is almost clinical in its one-sidedness. One pilot mutters, "It wasn't even sport." Another stares at the screen and says nothing, remembering the night sees swallowing friends. The Hellcat's reputation is sealed. Production lines at Grumman roar. 12,275 built by 1945. It will end the war with a 19-to-1 kill ratio, the highest of any American fighter. David McCampbell finishes with 34 victories, the Navy's top ace. Alexander Vrashew bags 19. The Zero, once laughed at no one, becomes a one mocked in Allied briefing rooms. But victory has a shadow. Japan's pilot training pipeline is broken. Survivors like Sakai fly kamikazes in the final year, trading life for one desperate strike. The skies over Okinawa and the home islands will be filled with fire again, but never again with the graceful dominance of the Zero. The Hellcat has swept the skies clean, yet the cost in young lives, on both sides, lingers like smoke over the Philippine Sea. What came next for the men who flew the Blue Devils? And how did the Hellcat's reign shape the final acts of the Pacific War? October 25th, 1944, 0640 hours. The Gulf of Leyte, Philippines. Rain squalls lash the flight deck of the USS Enterprise as Lieutenant Commander James E. Duffy, skipper VF-10, is catapulted into a gray dawn. His F6F, 3 Hellcat claws through low cloud, joining the Combat Air Patrol orbiting Admiral William Bull, Halsey's Third Fleet. Below, the Japanese combined fleet has sortied in a last desperate gamble. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, history's largest naval engagement. For separate Japanese forces converge, aiming to smash the American invasion beaches. Halsey's carriers are the shield. You feel the damp chill in the cockpit, The salt spray on the windshield, the low growl of the R. 2800 as Duffy climbs to 12,000 feet. Radar vectors him north. Bogies inbound. Angels 10, distance 60 miles. It's Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force. Battleships, including the monster Yamato, steaming through San Bernardino Strait. But the real threat now is from the sky. At 0700, the first Japanese air attack hits. Zeros Judas. Vals, many flown by pilots who survived the Marianas disaster, now reinforced with whatever Japan can scrape together. They come in low over Samar, targeting the escort carriers of Taffy 3. Hellcats and the Jeep carriers rise to meet them, but it's the fast carrier groups that bear the brunt. Duffy spots a formation of 30-plus aircraft boring in. Tally-ho! Bandits 3 o'clock low. He rolls the squadron into a dive, throttle firewalled. The Hellcats plummet at 400 knots. Gun sights glowing. Duffy picks a lead zero, closes to 400 yards, squeezes. The .50s hammer. Tracers converging on the cockpit. The Zero snaps into a spin, trailing glycol and flame. One down. He zooms through the formation, wingman covering his tail, resets above. Across the Gulf, the pattern repeats. Hellcats dominate the air over the fleet. In 1 hour, 3rd Fleet fighters claim 67 Japanese aircraft. The attackers that get to face a wall of anti-aircraft fire that blackens the sky. But the real shock comes later in the day. At 10:40, word crackles across the fleet. Enemy carriers sighted north. Halsey has taken the bait. Ozawa's decoy force, for carriers with barely 100 aircraft left. The 3rd Fleet races north at 30 knots, leaving San Bernardino Strait unguarded. Kurita's heavy ships emerge into the path of the tiny escort carriers. Yet, even here, Hellcats play their part. Pilots from Enterprise, Intrepid, and Essex launch strike after strike against Ozawa. Lieutenant Junior Grade Robert E. Clements, VF 18, strays the carrier Zuikaku, veteran of Pearl Harbor, watching his tracers stitch across her flight deck. Bombs and torpedoes follow. Zuikaku rolls over and sinks, the last of the 6 carriers that struck Hawaii. By dusk, the Japanese carrier force is annihilated. Hellcats claim another 100-plus kills in the Cape and Ganyo phase alone. The once mighty Kido Butai is no more. The laughter of 1941 is now a distant, bitter memory. But the cost of Halsey's dash north is felt off Samar. Kurita's battleship Savage Taffy 3, sinking Gamber Bay and escorts. Hellcats and Avengers from the Jeep carriers fight back with improvised attacks, dropping depth charges and even empty fuel tanks in desperation. Their courage buys time for Kurita to inexplicably withdraw. As night falls, exhausted Hellcat pilots trap aboard heaving decks in heavy seas. The Battle of Leyte Gulf ends with Japan's surface fleet shattered. Naval power has passed irrevocably to the United States. The Hellcat's escort role, protecting the fleet that now rules the waves, is cemented. Winter 1944-45. The Philippines campaign grinds on. Hellcats fly from newly captured airstrips on Leyte and Mindoro, supporting MacArthur's troops. Ground crews work in mud and monsoon, patching bullet holes with canvas and hope. Pilots like Ensign Thomas J. Hudna VF 32 fly close air support, rocketing Japanese bunkers on Luzon, watching Marines wave gratefully from shell holes. But a new shadow darkens the skies. October 25th, the same day Zuikaku sank, marks the first organized kamikaze attacks off Leyte. Young Japanese pilots, many barely trained, deliberately crash explosive-laden aircraft into American ships. Conventional dogfights give way to something more primal. You can almost hear the frantic radio calls. Kamikaze! Kamikaze diving on Princeton. The light carrier erupts in flames, abandoned and scuttled. Hellcat pilots adapt grimly. Combat air patrols thicken. Radar pickets push farther out. When a lone aircraft approaches without responding to IFF challenges, Hellcats pounce without hesitation. Lieutenant Junior Grade Roy W. Eric Erickson, VF 83 aboard USS Essex, becomes an unwilling specialist. On January 6, 1945, he downs 5 kamikazes in one patrol over Lingayen Gulf. They just kept coming straight at the ships, he later said, voice flat. You shot until they went in. The Hellcat's 6 guns and rugged airframe prove ideal for these brutal intercepts, absorbing return fire, staying airborne with battle damage. By February 1945, the fast carriers support the Iwo Jima invasion. Hellcats soften the island for weeks, strafing gun positions on Mount Suribachi. Pilots fly 4-5 sorties a day, returning with wings hold like Swiss cheese. Night fighter variants, F6F with wing-mounted radar, prowl the darkness, guided by shipboard controllers to splash nocturnal snoopers. Then comes Okinawa, the bloodiest campaign of the Pacific. From April 1st to June 22nd, 1945, the 10th Army storms the island, while the fleet endures the longest, most intense kamikaze onslaught of the war. Over 1,900 special attack aircraft sortie against the Allied Armada. Hellcats bear the primary burden of defense. Squadrons rotate continuous CAPs, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Pilots sleep in cockpits between launches. Commander Leroy W. Keith VF, 30 aboard USS Bellowwood, claims 11 kills in April alone, many kamikazes. The fleet forms a layered defense. Picket destroyers 50 miles out, then inner screens, then the carriers themselves ring with battleships. You feel the exhaustion, the constant vibration, the flak burst blooming black around you, the sudden dive of a Zero or Oscar packed with 550 pounds of explosives. The smell of fear is real now, sharp and metallic. On April 6th to 7th, the Kikyusui No. 1 mass attack sends 355 kamikazes and escorts. Hellcats claim 247 of the 355 total losses inflicted on the Japanese. But some get through. Destroyer Nukem takes 6 hits. Battleship Yamato, sortied in a final suicide run, is sunk by air attack far to the north. Through 10 Kikyusui operations, Hellcats rack up staggering scores. Air Group 84 aboard USS Bunker Hill alone claims over 200 victories. The final tally for Okinawa, American fighters, overwhelmingly Hellcats, shoot down more than 1,400 Japanese aircraft. The fleet survives, battered but unbroken, yet the human toll is immense. 36 Allied ships sunk, 368 damaged, mostly by kamikazes. Nearly 5,000 sailors killed. Hellcat losses mount too, not just in combat, but from operational fatigue. Deck crashes, ditching mid-air collisions in crowded skies. Saburo Sakai flies his last missions over Okinawa, now in a Kawanishi Shurden fighter, claiming a few Hellcats before wounds ground him permanently. He survives the war, haunted by the reversal. We had nothing left but our lives to give. By August 1945, Hellcats escort B-29s over Japan itself, strafing airfields, downing the last desperate interceptors. When the atomic bombs fall and surrender comes, many pilots sit on ready alert, engines idling, unable to believe it's over. The F6F Hellcat ends a war with 5,163 confirmed kills, over half of all U.S. Navy aerial victories in the Pacific. 19-to-1 ratio. 75 Hellcat aces. It never lost its reputation as the Zero's nemesis. In the end, the Japanese pilots who once laughed at rumors of a fat Grumman learned the hardest lesson of war. Superiority is fleeting. A better machine, flown by well-trained men with overwhelming industrial backing, can sweep even the proudest from the sky. But for the survivors on both sides, the memories remain. The roar of the double wasp, the flash of tracers, the sudden silence when a friend's voice cuts out forever. The smell of fear is real now, sharp and metallic. On April 6th to 7th, the Kikyusui No. 1 mass attack sends 355 kamikazes and escorts. Hellcats claim 247 of the 355 total losses inflicted on the Japanese. But some get through. Destroyer Nukem takes 6 hits. Battleship Yamato, sortied in a final suicide run, is sunk by air attack far to the north. Through 10 Kikyusui operations, Hellcats rack up staggering scores. Air Group 84 aboard USS Bunker Hill alone claims over 200 victories. The final tally for Okinawa, American fighters, overwhelmingly Hellcats, shoot down more than 1,400 Japanese aircraft. The fleet survives, battered but unbroken. Yet the human toll is immense. 36 Allied ships sunk, 368 damaged, mostly by kamikazes. Nearly 5,000 sailors killed. Hellcat losses mount too, not just in combat, but from operational fatigue. Deck crashes, ditching, mid-air collisions in crowded skies. Saburo Sakai flies his last missions over Okinawa, now in a Kawanishi Shurden fighter, claiming a few Hellcats before wounds ground him permanently. He survives the war, haunted by the reversal. We had nothing left but our lives to give. By August 1945, Hellcats escort B-29s over Japan itself, strafing airfields, downing the last desperate interceptors. When the atomic bombs fall and surrender comes, many pilots sit on ready alert, engines idling, unable to believe it over. The F6F Hellcat ends a war with 5,163 confirmed kills, over half of all U.S. Navy aerial victories in the Pacific. 19-to-1 ratio. 75 Hellcat aces. It never lost its reputation as the Zero's nemesis. In the end, the Japanese pilots who once laughed at rumors of a fat Grumman learned the hardest lesson of war. Superiority is fleeting. A better machine, flown by well-trained men with overwhelming industrial backing, can sweep even the proudest from the sky. But for the survivors on both sides, the memories remain: the roar of the double wasp, the flash of tracers, the sudden silence when a friend's voice cuts out forever. August 15, 1945. 1,100 hours. Aboard the USS Essex, somewhere off the Japanese coast. Lieutenant Commander David McCampbell stands on the flight deck, helmet tucked under his arm, staring east toward Tokyo Bay. The R-2800 on his Hellcat idle behind him, warm and familiar, but the sky is empty. No launch signal, no klaxon, just a slap of waves against the hull and the distant crackle of radio traffic from the Missouri, where Emperor Hirohito's surrender is being formalized. You can almost taste the stillness, salt air mixed with a faint, lingering bite of avgas, the deck warm under boots that have known too many cat shots. McCampbell's flight suit is faded, patched, the stenciled Mincy 3, on his fuselage scarred from flak and bullet strikes. He has 34 confirmed kills, 9 in one day, the Medal of Honor around his neck. Yet his eyes are distant. The war that defined him is ending not with final dogfight, but with a voice on the radio. Across the Pacific, other Hellcat pilots feel the same hollow quiet. In ready rooms, men who once scrambled 4 times a day now sit with coffee going cold, staring at gun camera stills pinned to bulkheads, Zeros exploding, tracers converging the empty ocean. Alexander Vrashu, 19 victories, folds a letter from home. Ensign Wilbur Spiderweb, who splashed his first Zeke in the Marianas turkey shoot, cleans his .45 absent-mindedly. They have become the deadliest fighter pilots in history, yet victory feels strangely muted. On the other side of the surrender table, the survivors of Japan's naval air arm grapple with a different silence. Lieutenant Saburo Sakai, one of the few pre-war aces still alive, sits in a hospital ward in Japan, bandages over his remaining good eye. He has flown his last mission over Iwo Jima, scoring hits on Hellcats even as the tide turned irreversible. Now he listens to the Emperor's broadcast, the crackling voice admitting defeat. The Zero that carried him to 64 victories is gone, scrapped, burned, or sunk. The laughter of 1,941 briefings echoes in his mind like a ghost. The F6F Hellcat's final wartime tally is staggering. 5,163 enemy aircraft destroyed in air combat, more than any other Allied fighter type in any theater. A 19-to-1 kill ratio that stands unmatched. It escorted every major carrier strike from 1943 onward, protected the fleet through the kamikaze storm, and enabled the island-hopping campaign that brought American bombers within range of Japan itself. Grumman built 12,275, more than any carrier fighter ever, and lost only 270 in aerial combat. The rest fell to flak, accidents, or the relentless grind of carrier operations. But numbers only tell half the story. In the years after VJ Day, the Hellcat fades quickly from frontline service. Jet age arrives with brutal speed. The F6F Bearcat, faster and more agile, replaces it aboard carriers in 1946. Korean War skies belong to Panthers and Banshees. Most Hellcats are scrapped, sold to foreign air forces, or pushed over the side to make room for newer birds. A few end up in museums, polished and static, blue paint gleaming under fluorescent lights, 6.50s frozen in silent threat. The men fare differently. David McCampbell rises to captain, commands a carrier, then retires to Florida. He speaks rarely of the war, preferring to fish and tend his garden. When asked about the turkey shoot, he says only, "We were lucky to have the right airplane at the right time." Alexander Vrasha becomes a test pilot, then a banker, always modest about his 19 kills. Many others return to civilian life, salesmen, engineers, teachers, carrying memories they share only at squadron reunions, over beers and quiet toasts to the missing. Saburo Sakai writes a memoir, Samurai, one of the first honest Japanese accounts of the war. In it, he admits the Zero's flaws, praises the Hellcat's ruggedness, and mourns the waste of young lives on both sides. He becomes a pacifist, working with American veterans to promote reconciliation. When he dies in 2000, old enemies attend his funeral. The Hellcat's true legacy is not in steel or statistics, but in the shift it forced. It proved that air superiority could be manufactured, designed on drawing boards in Bethpage, mass-produced on Long Island assembly lines, delivered by a nation whose industrial might dwarfed all others. Japan's exquisite handcrafted Zero, born of scarcity and genius, could not match that scale. The laughter of Japanese pilots in 1943 and early 1944 stemmed from pride in their early mastery. The silence that followed was the sound of a doctrine and a dream shattering against reality. Today, if you walk to the National Air and Space Museum or the USS Intrepid in New York, you'll find an F6F restored in glossy navy blue, folding wings spread, Pratt and Whitney stars stenciled on the cowling. Children climb on the wing roots for photos. Veterans pause longer, hands tracing bullet patches, eyes seeing tracers and burning zeros that no one else can. Stand there long enough and you can almost hear it. The deep-throated growl of the double wasp spooling up, the hiss of steam from the catapult, the sudden roar as another blue devil hurtles into the sky. The machine that Japanese pilots once mocked, then feared, then could not escape. It swept the Zeros from the sky, yes, but more than that, it carried a generation of young Americans home through fire, and in doing so, helped end the greatest naval war in history. The Pacific is quiet now. The carriers are gone, the pilots old or gone entirely. Only the Hellcat remains, a blunt, brutal, beautiful testament to what happens when ingenuity, industry, and courage converge. And somewhere in the wind over an empty ocean, you can still hear the echo, the laughter that turned to awe and finally to silence